Hello crafty friends, I'm Lien from Studio Cato and I'm so glad you're joining me again today. Today's card is all about die cutting, there is no stamping involved whatsoever, and it's all because I found this wonderful new company right here in Europe. The store is called A Pocket Full of Happiness, and I absolutely fell in love with their dies. I'm using the Circle Around cover die and the Tropical Paradise die set today. I'm not affiliated with them at all. This is not an ad. I bought these products with my own money, but I just love them so much. I die cut the Circle Around cover die twice from thick white cardstock, and I'm layering those two layers together with my Barely Arts Precision Craft glue. You could use spray adhesive for this, that would save you some time, or even the double-sided adhesive sheets, but I don't have any right now, so I'm just using my liquid glue and spending a little bit extra time. It's totally worth it in my opinion, because the dimension it adds will add a lot to this background, especially for this white-on-white background. I just make sure most of the die is covered, but it's definitely not a full coverage, and then I dab it off onto a scrap piece of paper to get rid of excess glue. This will prevent glue from oozing out of the sides and ruining your background. Now, as you can see, I die cut a ton of pieces from the Tropical Paradise die set, and I put them all onto some purple tape. So the purple tape is facing up here. And this will just keep them in place and make sure I don't have to put my fingers into wet paint. There are a lot of pieces here, so it took me a while. Don't worry, I am speeding up the coloring process for you. But what I'm doing here is adding some color with my Karin Brushmarkers. You could use regular watercolors for this, or even your distress inks, your distress oxide inks. Anything that is water reactive, and then I am blending it out with some clean water. I am not trying to be precise. The whole point of this is trying to make it look a little bit rough to get some color variations. So I am using a wetter brush than I usually do when watercoloring, but this will let the water flow more freely and create some interesting effects. Because that's the whole point of this. I am spending extra time coloring this piece by piece, just so I can get interesting looks on all of these flowers and leaves. If I wanted them to be more evenly colored, I would just cut them out of colored cardstock, but I think the look of watercoloring these die cuts makes them look more interesting, and you can really choose any color you want. You can mix and match colors. I think it's more fun this way, but it does take some extra time, of course. If you want to add some interest to your die cuts and not spend as much time as I did, you could cut them out of colored cardstock and do some ink blending to get a little bit of color variation. Like for these flowers, I would just put some extra darker ink in the middle of them if I had cut them out of colored cardstock. Or just ink blend around the edges to make those more defined. You can do whatever you want with them. Now again, the whole point of coloring all of these piece by piece was to give them an interesting look. So to add to that, I am also adding some splatter to all the flowers. That's why I put a little piece of paper over the leaves I had already put on my purple tape. I didn't want to get any of the pink on there, but I will add splatter to them as well. Here I'm taking a dark pink metallic watercolor from Finetec to add splatter as well. Now onto the leaves. When I'm coloring a bunch of leaves at once, I always make sure to use a lot of different greens. So for these dies, I have 4 different types of leaves, and I'm using 4 different types of green to color them. I used some lighter ones, and I used some more blue ones, and now I really want these last 2 types of leaves to be really dark, so I'm just using my markers only and not diluting them with water. These are all die cut from watercolor cardstock though, because that's the best cardstock for these Karin markers. And as you saw, I did use quite a bit of water already. Now you can see for the ferns, I used some turquoise, and for these, I think they're monstera leaves. I'm not a plant expert by any means. I'm using some really dark blue on the bottom of them to add some more shading. I love to use blues when I'm coloring a lot of leaves. It adds a little bit of extra punch to the whole card design. And again, if you don't want to spend all your time coloring these, you could also cut these from pattern paper maybe, that would be fun. There are other options than just watercoloring them, but that's what I chose to do. Now I'm going to add splatter to these leaves as well, but the problem here was that the first layer of paint wasn't dry yet, so any splatter wasn't showing up at all, it was just blending in with the wet paint. So I'm going to heat set these leaves first to speed up the drying process, and then I'm just going to try again. To do this, I'm just scribbling some of my marker onto an acrylic block, adding water, and then picking it up with a paintbrush. This went absolutely everywhere, so I really need to get a splatter box or something, because my whole work surface was covered in paint, and especially that metallic paint, it was really hard to clean up afterwards. And one more tip, make sure your die cuts are completely dry before you pull them off your tape, otherwise they will tear. For the sentiment, I cut out the outline 3 times from black cardstock, and the shadow layer, it's not really a shadow layer, it's more of a base layer, 2 times from thick white cardstock, and I'm layering all of those together. And yep, this was a little bit of a pain to do, but I think it's worth it to add some dimension. It really makes your sentiment pop. I'm not going to make you sit through the entire thing, but I'll do one letter for you. Again, I'm putting on glue and then dabbing some of the excess off onto a scrap piece of paper. I do this all the time and it really helps with stacking die cuts. I'm then adhering the outline to the white letter, and I do that for all the letters to come. Now there are 2 dies for the flowers. There's also a base layer that doesn't cut out the middle. So I cut those for both sizes of flowers a couple of times from thick white cardstock, and then I can assemble my flowers on top of that. I'm not doing this to add extra dimension or anything, just to assemble them easily. These are super easy to assemble because there's only 3 pieces, and I just assembled them as you should, but I think it would be fun to offset the middle a little bit and maybe use some colored cardstock behind, or cut the part that I did in pink now, cut that twice from cardstock maybe to add some dimension. You can do a lot of fun things with these flowers. Now I'm aligning the sentiment onto my cutting mat using the grid there, and I then put a piece of purple tape over it so I can pick it up all at once. I know it's straight, and then I can adhere it to my card. I then let that dry before I peel it off, because I tried then and I just pulled up the letter. Once the glue is dry though, it works perfectly, and it's really satisfying to peel off that tape. Now with my sentiment in place, I can start arranging all the flowers and leaves on there. This is the fun part, but also absolutely the part that takes the most time. I'm just seeing what works, trying out a couple of different things, and once I'm happy with it, I will glue everything in place. Now, if I would make this card again, I would add some splatter to the background as well, maybe some black even, to pull in the black of the sentiment. I think the background is really nice, but I think it could use with just a little touch more, you know? By the way, if you have present seal, it's like a fancy cling wrap type of thing, this would be perfect to use here. I just forgot to use mine because I actually do have it. But basically you put it over your arrangement once you're happy with it, and it picks up everything at once. Then you just add glue to the back and adhere it all at once to your card. Now I have to admit, I kind of also just like doing it like this. Makes me feel like a florist or something. You can also see that I'm letting my leaves hang over the edge a lot. I try to avoid letting them hang over the bottom too much because otherwise you can't really display the card standing up. But I love the look of this. The only downside to this, of course, is that you somehow have to fit this inside an envelope. My tip for that is to not adhere your pieces down completely. I only put some glue on the bottom of the leaves, and anything that hangs over the edge doesn't have glue underneath it, so I can shift that in place to fit inside the envelope. I don't mean bend or fold or crease, just slightly nudge it in the right direction. Now I'm showing off the card here and then remembered I wanted to add just a little bit more. So I'm going to add some... Oh, I'm going to add another leaf first. Forgot I did that. And then I'm going to add some bubbles. These are from Little Things from Lucy's Cards. They're so fun to use. They go with everything. And I just arrange them with my jewel picker. And then I will glue them onto the card and even onto some flowers as like dewdrops. Again, using the Barely Arts Precision Craft Glue. God, that's such a long name. And again, I'm here to remind you that everything is sped up in this video. This card took me 2.5 hours to make with all the die cutting and all the painting and all the layering with the sentiment. I think it was absolutely worth it, but I just think it's worth mentioning that I'm not as fast as a sped up video. Once again, I'm making a matching envelope. This is Clairefontaine DCP 250 GSM paper. I'm just going to do some stamping on this. I'm going to be honest, stuff went wrong here and it's not as great as I wanted it to be, but I think it's still worth showing you. So that's what I'm doing now. I die cut some of the leaves and the flowers from craft foam, and I am adhering them temporarily onto some acrylic blocks, front and back, because I only have 2 acrylic blocks, and then I'm using them to stamp. Now my first mistake here is that I adhered them wrong, so they're a mirror image of the actual die when stamped. I die cut some masks for this, and I can't really use them because I can't tape them down since they're a mirror image of the image I stamped. So I can't stamp as many leaves as I want, but I think it's still a fun technique and I wanted to show you even though it didn't turn out perfectly. So that's the finished card and envelope. I really like how this card turned out, all the dimension and all the interest with the splatter and the watercolor. I absolutely love these dies. I hope you liked it as well. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. You can also subscribe to my channel for more videos. And in the description box, you can find a full list of supplies, as well as a link to the blog post and my Instagram. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.